Hello.
evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Lisa.
Hey, evening.
Sorry, I need to go back. So some of you joined for the Burmese, but this will be the same, but in English. Maybe there'll be a little bit that's different, who knows. Okay, so today we're looking at behaviorism, and so we're moving to a new module. So we're going to look at learning theories. So learning theories, we're going to kind of look at some of the main theories around education in the last about 150 years. So I think most of them are from within the last 150 years. So we're looking at some of the main theories that have been proposed and used by teachers and within education. Behavioralism, I would say, is one of the most traditional learning theories in that we'll get more into it, but it's actually it was mostly used from the early 1900s until the 1960s. So it's used a little bit now in certain ways, but for the most part, it was used from the 1900s until the 1960s. So a little bit of history of education. Okay. Participants will be able to explain behaviorism and evaluate it as a learning theory. Okay. So community guidelines, we are happy you are here. If you are late or have technical issues, please join the conversation as you are able. Mute yourself when you are not talking, but please remember to unmute yourself when you do want to talk. We want to be able to hear everyone. Please complete the pre-session interactive self-paced slides and the post-session feedback form. This will help us revise and develop course content. And if you have any questions or technical issues during the session, please send a message in the chat box indicating so, or email us at info@hettgroup.com. Okay. So my name is Lisa. I will be leading this training. I previously worked as an English teacher, and I've done environmental education and I've done some teacher training. And Kathleen Kathleen made these slides and will be the co-host. Would you like to introduce yourself? Sorry.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Griley. As Lisa said, I help make the slides for the self-paced sessions and for these sessions on Saturdays, and I also teach English and Spanish.
How well do you understand behaviorism, if you know what behaviorism is? So not at all, a little bit, somewhat, quite well, or extremely well. So show with your thumbs. So turn on your camera. If you can't turn on your camera, you can type it in the chat box. So 1, 2, 3. How well do you understand behaviorism? Okay. So I can't see the chat box. So we're going to watch a short movie. I decided to keep this one, the original one, and not the one from the Burmese class. Both were good videos. But we may just watch the first about 3 minutes of this instead of all 5 minutes. It is a little bit long. Sorry, I think my sound, I have to stop and reshare with sound.
Ivan Pavlov in the 1890s. During this time, Pavlov did a lot of research around the digestive processes of dogs. One day during his research, Pavlov noticed that the dogs began to salivate in the presence of the technician who...
Oops, sorry, just 1 second.
The most famous work in classical conditioning was done by Ivan Pavlov in the 1890s. During this time, Pavlov did a lot of research around the digestive processes of dogs. One day during his research, Pavlov noticed that the dogs began to salivate in the presence of the technician who normally fed them. He wondered if the technician was a trigger that stimulated a response associated with food. To find out, he constructed an experiment that would allow him to measure a dog's output of saliva. First, he served the dog food. Then, he served food while playing the sounds of a metronome and repeated the process a few times. Finally, he removed the food and only played the metronome. The dogs began to salivate in response to the metronome alone. Pavlov concluded that if a new stimulus was present when the dog was given food, then that stimulus became associated with food and caused salivation on its own.
Okay. So how did the dog learn? Maybe not mentally, but it was like salivating or spitting or spittle. How did it adapt or learn? You can put it in the chat box. Yeah. So what about the metrodome? Does anyone know what that is? It's like kind of, it's for music, it's kind of like tick, 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 tick. And so it makes a sound while they were feeding the dog.
The sense of the dogs. He wanted to get to the food, and he responds by dripping saliva.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the dog drools like when it eats, and then the dog started to associate the sound, like the tick, 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 with the food, because whenever it heard the tick, 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 tick sound, it got food. So it associated it without even probably thinking, but it associated the ticking sound with the food. So both of it together. And it became automatic so that the dog associated the two ideas together. And then even when there was no food, when it heard the ticking sound, it would start to drool because it would think about the ticking sound was associated with food. So it kind of associated the two ideas together. And this is called classic conditioning. It's you condition someone to react in a certain way. And it's like an automatic reaction to something. You're not thinking it through, you're just reacting. You just reply without thinking. And so that's what the dog is doing here. It's just drooling and getting kind of having a physical response to being hungry from the ticking sound, because it's come to associate the ticking sound with food. So it automatically makes it hungry. So this is the start of classical conditioning. And there's been more research done on this, but obviously this is an example of research that was done. I think early 1900s that this was completed. So when it comes to learning, what is this called and how does it work? So when it was done in an experiment, we called it classical conditioning, but when we use it as a learning theory, or how does it relate to a learning theory? And how does it work?
Behaviorism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Behaviorism.
Yeah. Yeah. So behavioralism is this idea that there's a stimulus and then a response, and that's how people learn. It's focused on, it's almost like people are computers. You know, with a computer, you type something in, you go to a website. Your computer is not thinking, it's just you input something and then there's an output. So there's a stimulus and then there's a response. So that's how it thinks about learning: input, output. And like I mentioned, this was a very common theory from the beginning of the 1900s until the 1960s. So for about 60 years, this was a very, 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 very common learning theory. And this is how they thought people learned, was just you put input in, you get something out, in, out, like a computer. So something happens in the environment that causes you to act a certain way, that it doesn't matter what you're thinking about, you can train anyone to act a certain way. All that matters is the environment and how you train them. I guess in a way, it's almost like the military, like you train them to respond exactly like this, and you put the training in and then they respond. No critical thinking skills. So people are blank slates like a computer. A computer does not think. So you just put it in. So input, output. External things cause them to change behavior and can be trained to react in different ways. So you can just train people to respond in a certain way. And that people will respond. If you train them well enough, they'll respond exactly like how you train them. So that was this theory that was very famous and very, very common from the 1900s to the 1960s. I added a slide in here, or not yet. So where is behaviorism used in the classroom?
To stimulate and to persuade the students to pay interest in their learning.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. That might be more around motivation, but
Yeah.
drills are an example of how behaviorism is still used. An example, oh, there's someone in the chat box. When teachers give instructions to the students, yeah, maybe they give exact instructions. They want input, output kind of thing. Yeah, that might be behaviorism. Yeah, drills. When I was younger, my dad would practice. This isn't quite classroom, but kind of related. Well, and you could do it, and you do it in the classroom as well. So we would practice math questions. So my dad would ask me like 9 times 9, and I would answer as fast as I could, 81, you know, or like 2 times 2, 4. So when I was a child, that would be an example of a drill that shows an example of behaviorism. The stimulus, the stimulus was him asking the math question, and then my response was the response. So stimulus, response. And I did it so fast that I wasn't thinking about it. I just knew the answer. And for things that you have to memorize, that can be useful, because there are things we have to memorize. Like, especially as children, you have to memorize your multiplication tables, your division, your addition, your subtraction. You have to memorize the alphabet. You know, there's a lot when you're a child you have to memorize. So when it comes to memorization, behaviorism can be useful. It talks about question and answer, the same thing. Ask a question, expect an answer. So that's an example of behaviorism. Guided practice, yeah. Regular review, positive reinforcement. So someone does something good in your classroom. Maybe they had very good behavior. They helped another student. you give them, you'd say, good job, and then they want to help the student again. So that's a good example of behaviorism. So your students are helpful and nice, and you reward them by praising them. So again, the stimulus is the stimulus would then be like the praise for them doing good behavior, and then the response is that they feel happy and they want to do good behavior again. Another example might be that an example in Thailand of behaviorism in the classroom is if you say good morning, all the students stand up and they say, good morning, teacher. So they've gotten used to that practice. That's something they do in every class. They stand up, they say, good morning, teacher. So it's good for routine. And sometimes routine can be useful because you don't have to think as much about it, especially in the classroom. So like these classes online are structured kind of the same. So different content, similar structure. And that's because then you can respond knowing what to do next. So it can be useful in that way that you know what the next step is without even having to think about it. You know, like the first time we used Pear Deck, it was difficult, or the first time you use Pear Deck, it might be difficult. But if you use it over and over again, you know that at least our second activity, we are going to use Pear Deck, so that you get used to it, and that you are expecting that we are going to be using Pear Deck. And so that would be an example. And you don't have to think about it as much. It's not as difficult. You do it automatically. So behaviorism can be, well, want to motivate students. It's not really about motivation. It's about just inputting something and having an output. I don't know how you'd use it to motivate. It's, I mean, positive reinforcement. Yes, sorry, that is a good example. Sorry, that is motivation. My apologies. So yeah, positive reinforcement can be used to motivate students. I added in a slide here just to explain a little bit better. So what are the main positives of behaviorism? When is behaviorism good or useful? I kind of mentioned it, but.
Positive behaviors in
Sorry?
being introducing in classrooms to students and teacher, and then some good morning or good evening saying introduction to others.
Yeah, definitely, like routines of saying good morning, good evening. I mean, those are all examples of also things we learned as children. When, say in English, when we're a child, we learn to say, hello, how are you? And we teach that first thing, like, hello, how are you? I'm good. You know, like you don't think about it, you just respond. And the same in Myanmar. So to memorize things well, yes, yeah. And how about negatives? What are some negatives of behaviorism?
Negative behaviorism I usually found some of the party for voting in Myanmar. Private body, they also talk about negative behaviorism.
Okay.
And they made like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and some of the comments, the negative one is they can't get critical thinking. Good. So yeah, again, it's thinking about people like they're computers, and people are not computers. They're not just a blank slate without thinking. So in reality, people think and they can think critically. So yeah, it doesn't involve critical thinking or analyzing, and it lacks a mental process. Yeah, so same thing. It doesn't involve anything kind of mentally. It's just what your behavior is. So it is a form, I would say, of passive learning. But occasionally, like, there is uses for it. It is useful, like I said, for memorization or routines, that type of thing. So that's what I have here. So positives, efficient for memorization or routine procedures. Negatives, does not support critical thinking or focus on the internal. Okay, so you will see an example of behavioralism on the slide. Oh, just 1 second. I have to edit. 2 seconds. Okay, you will see an example of behaviorism on the slide. Click stimulus or response to identify the highlighted portion. Okay. So when the teacher is frustrated by her student's behavior, she stands in the middle of the room with her arms crossed. The students know that they have done something wrong, so they are quiet and listen to what she says. So I'm going to do a poll. The part that's highlighted in yellow, she stands in the middle of the room with her arms folded. Is that a stimulus or a response?
Stimulus.
Yeah. Just give people an opportunity to answer the poll. That's pretty much everyone. So yes, it is a stimulus, definitely. Some other examples are, like, when I worked with children, I would go, when I wanted them to be quiet, I would go, and they would repeat back. So that would be, my stimulus would be this. I've seen people with adults ring a bell. So that's more for adults. But you can have different ways, that different stimulus for behavior where you want people to be quiet or to behave. And this part of it, they are quiet and listen to what she says. Is this a stimulus or the response? I'm just going to wait a few more seconds. Yes, so yes, this is a response. She does a certain behavior, she crosses her arms, and the students know to be quiet. So if you clap, maybe they know to repeat the clap and to be quiet. And it becomes a habit that they do over and over and over again. So it's an automatic response to when the teacher wants them to be quiet. Maybe at first it started off, when I ring this bell, can everyone be quiet? but afterwards they became used to it. It became routine, and it happened over and over and over again. Next one. The English professors use drills to help her students learn verb tenses. When the teacher says past, the students yell out ed. When the teacher says continuous, the students yell out ing. They practice the same drill over and over again until they respond automatically. So the part highlighted when the teacher says past and the teacher says continuous. Is this an example of a stimulus or a response? We'll just wait 30 seconds. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So yeah, this is the stimulus. The teacher says something and then the students respond. So what is the teacher saying to start with? So that is the stimulus. And the students yell out ed or the students yell out ing. Is that the stimulus or the response? Good, it is the response. Whenever the engineering students successfully perform an experiment, the professor displays their work for all of the other students to see. All of the other students are eager to show off their good work, so they work hard to get their work displayed. So the part that's highlighted is that the stimulus or the response. Okay. Oh, so good. That's the stimulus. And they work harder. So the professor shows their work. And then they work harder. Is the working harder, the stimulus, the response? Good, it is the response. Okay, so for our second activity, you will create your own example in groups of a stimulus and a response. So you have to brainstorm and think of your own examples. You will use Pear Deck to record this. Oh no, weird. Just 1 second. Let me open my Pear Deck. So in groups, work together, and one person can share their screen and type. So brainstorm an example. If you want to do more than one, you can. But what could be an example of a stimulus and a response? So like I gave my example, father calls out multiplication. Now I can multiplication questions. Daughter answers as fast as she can. Or you can come up with another one. In Thailand, the teacher says, good morning. Sorry, the teacher enters the classroom and says, good morning. Students stand up and say, good morning, teacher, and sit down again. So those are some examples that you could do. So brainstorm in your own group, some examples. And here is a link to the pear deck. And I will be putting people in 3 groups. And if you have any questions, just message in the, I think there's a help button, or send an email. Okay. Create, you have 10 minutes to work on this. Create 3 breakout rooms.
Given what's so how can
So how can I write? Please give some example.
Student note that they are not allowed to smoke on this area.
Okay. So I'll just go through some of the responses we got. They look pretty good. No smoking sign in the on the campus, good. I don't know about, I can't remember in Myanmar, but in Canada, we always have like what looks like a cigarette with like a line and circle to mean no smoking. Students avoid smoking in the prohibited areas. Yes, good. You see that, you see the sign, you know automatically that you can't smoke there. Homework is given by teacher, it is done by students. I mean, this is how it's supposed to be. It doesn't actually always happen, but yes. The school bell rings, the students understand the class is over. Yes, definitely, good. Teacher asks the students to construct sentences using the given words. Good, students give response with a relevant sentence structure. Excellent, yeah, so it's very simple. Ask and answer, ask and answer. When the students see their teacher anywhere in Myanmar, they greet her Mingala Bar, Mingala Bar, Mingala Ba Sayama. Myanmar people see anyone that's familiar, they respond with a smile. Yes. And also related to that, a lot of what you learn, like cultural responses, might be related to behaviorism. Like you learn to respond automatically. In Germany, maybe they don't smile as much. So maybe if they see someone, they're not as likely to smile. But in Myanmar, the automatic response is to smile. Okay, I call the attendants, they say present or they're absent if they're not there. Good. Good morning to you all. Good morning, teacher. Excellent. The teacher praises what the students have done. They feel very satisfied and want to work harder on their homework. Good, those are all good examples. When the teacher assigns a homework, the students mince their work through emails. Yes, definitely. Good. Yeah, again, if they do their homework, it's not always supposed to be like that, but different in reality. Okay. Do you agree with the theory of behaviorism? Why or why not? You can put it in the chat box or you can just tell me if you want. Do you agree with it? Why or why not?
Yes, we
Yes, I
can.
agree. Because
Yes. Yes, I agreed it. I agreed.
I agree.
Yes, we can. I think maybe I can agree partially regarding with the affecting one's on one's life, but it is because there are so many people who were used to spend their time with the drug addicts and or heavy smokers, and then they are addicted to drugs and smoker as the effect of his friends or uh, his classmates.
Yeah, so then,
But
yeah,
yeah, but amazingly, you can find some facts that some people were used to live with those kinds of people, but uh, uh, they are not affected by such external factors. They are happening or learning on their own ways against the others around them. And I mean, behavior is not totally acceptable. There are some individuals who have their own ideas and who are having it in their own way,
yeah,
cannot affect by the environment.
yeah,
So
definitely.
because for example, in my environment, there are so many football crazy, so many, almost 99% of the monks are crazy about football. But I try to watch the football match, but I really hate to watch the football match. So that is the unique characteristic. So that's why I cannot accept those kinds of totally to the behaviorism. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. Like we're each individuals. So obviously like the way we respond to things, what we like or dislike, if we will respond to these depends on the individual. And yeah, so I doubt a certain stimulus from environment can totally control our behavior because we are humans, not animals. Yes, definitely. We have thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but someone said we learn from imitation, and that is true. And yeah, it can be effective in certain situations. So yeah, anyone else want to explain why? Sorry, someone else wrote, yes, reactions are based on what we are thinking and believing at the time of stimulus. Yeah. So yeah, like we might have other thoughts about things. We might have different moods. So that can affect how we respond to things. Yeah, and it is passive learning. So as far as a teaching method, like obviously don't use it to try and teach critical thinking skills. But it can be used for like drills, very basic memorization and routines and things like that, but not critical thinking skills. Don't try and use it for critical thinking skills. Anyone else want to add anything? Okay, I'm going to share the screen again. So how well do you understand behaviorism? Not at all, a little bit, somewhat, quite well, or extremely well. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. How well? Okay, awesome. And you can put it in the chat as well. Awesome. Quite well, quite well. 3, 3. Thumbs up. Okay. 4, quite well. So thank you very much. I will send out the course feedback in the email, as well as a link to the Google Meet or Google Classroom where we keep copies of all of the material and videos from the classes. Thank you. And thank you very much for joining us. If you want, you can fill in the feedback form once for the Burmese and once for the English if you attended both and just indicate which one, or you can fill it in together and just have one feedback form. It's up to you what you would like to do. Just indicate which one, if it was just for the Burmese, just for the English, or if it was for both. Anything else? And next week, we're going to look at cognitivism, which is one of the other main learning theories. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Oh, I would like to ask you one thing.
Sure.
Yeah. One feedback for Arabic sections, another feedback for English sections. You mean like that?
It's up to
Two
you.
feedback.
It's your choice.
Yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, thank you. I chose in Arabic section.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you very much. And
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
here.
Good night to you all. Good night.